Okay. Hey everyone. Hope you all had a fantastic Thursday. Today we are finishing HP Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space. To recap what we read on Tuesday. Yeah, it was Tuesday. A meteorite, well actually no, before that, it's a story within a story. The story started with a surveyor surveyor going out into the New England countryside to scout out an area that's being dammed and will be flooded. There, he interviews a farmer who is a neighbor of another farmer who had a meteorite crash on his property years and years ago. The farmer's family with the meteorite had their land and themselves poisoned over the next year. And the farmer that in the present tense is being interviewed retells the story of how he went to the poison farm, found everyone dying. He found Nahum, Mr. Nahum, the poison farmer, literally falling apart before him, and fled that farm after hearing something within the well, escaping back down beneath the surface after scaring off his horse. Let's see. Then, in the story within the story, Amy, the farmer who's not poisoned and is being interviewed, goes to town to tell the authorities and is then forced against his will to take them back to the Nahum farm to show them everything, which is where we left off. So, yeah, as I just said, he went much against his will, for the afternoon was advancing and he feared the fall of night over that accursed place, but it was some comfort to have so many people with him, because he has the 3 officers, a coroner, a medical examiner, and a vet who treated the poison animals. So, now that we're all caught up, let's get into it. After I clear my throat. Damn. Okay, now let's get into it for real. The 6 men drove out in a Democrat wagon, following Amy's buggy, and arrived at the pest-ridden farmhouse about 4 o'clock. Used as officers were to gruesome experiences, not one remained unmoved at what was found in the attic and under the red check tablecloth on the floor below. The whole aspect of the farm, with its gray desolation, was terrible enough, but those 2 crumbling objects were beyond all bounds. No one could look long at them, and even the medical examiner admitted that there was very little left to examine. Specimens could be analyzed, of course, so he busied himself in obtaining them, and here it develops that a very puzzling aftermath occurred at the college laboratory, where the 2 files of dust were finally taken. Under the spectroscope, both samples gave off an unknown spectrum, in which many of the baffling bands were precisely like those which the strange meteor had yielded in the previous year. The property of emitting the spectrum vanished in a month, and the dust thereafter consisted mainly of alkaline phosphates and carbonates. Amy would not have told the men about the well if he had thought they meant to do anything then and there. It was getting towards sunset, and he was anxious to be away, but he could not help glancing nervously at the stony curb by the great sweep, and when a detective questioned him, he admitted that Nahum had feared something down there, so much so that he had never even thought of searching it for Merwin or Zenas. After that, nothing would do but that they empty and explore the well immediately. So Amy had to wait trembling while pail after pail of rank water was hauled up and splashed on the soaking ground outside. Men sniffed in disgust at the fluid, and toward the last held their noses against the fodder they were uncovering. It was not so long a job as they had feared it would be, since the water was phenomenally low. There was no need to speak to exactly of what they found. Merwin and Zenas were both there, in part, though the vestiges were mainly skeletal. There were also a small deer and a large dog in about the same state, and a number of bones of smaller animals. The ooze and slime at the bottom seemed inexplicably porous and bubbling, and a man who descended on handholds with a long pole found that he could sink the wooden shaft to any depth in the mud of the floor without meeting any solid obstruction. Twilight had now fallen, and lanterns were brought from the house. Then, when it was seen that nothing further could be gained from the well, everyone went indoors and conferred in the ancient sitting room while the intermittent light of a spectral half-moon played wanly on the gray desolation outside. The men were frankly nonplussed by the entire case, and could find no convincing common element to link the strange vegetable conditions, the unknown disease of livestock and humans, and the unaccountable deaths of Merwin and Zenas in that tainted well. They had heard the common country talk, it is true, but could not believe that anything contrary to natural law had occurred. No doubt, the meteor had poisoned the soil, but the illness of persons and animals who had eaten nothing grown in that soil was another matter. Was it the well water? Very possibly. It might be a good idea to analyze it. But what peculiar madness could have made both boys jump into the well? Their deeds were so similar, and the fragments showed that they had both suffered from the gray brittle death. Why was everything so gray and brittle? It was the coroner, seated near a window overlooking the yard, who first noticed the glow about the well. Night had fully set in, and all the abhorrent grounds seemed faintly luminous, with more than the fitful moonbeams. But this new glow was something definite and distinct. It appeared to shoot up from the black pit like a softened ray from a searchlight, giving dull reflections in the little ground pools where the water had been emptied. It had a very queer color, and as all the men clustered round the window, Amy gave a violent start, for the strange beam of ghastly miasma was to him of no unfamiliar hue. He had seen that color before, and feared to think what it might mean. He had seen it in the nasty brittle globule in that aerolite 2 summers ago, had seen it in the crazy vegetation of the springtime, and had thought he had seen it for an instant that very morning against the small barred window of that terrible attic room where nameless things had happened. It had flashed there a second, and a clammy and hateful current of vapor had brushed past him, and then poor Nahum had been taken by something of that color. He had said so at the last, said it was the globule in the plants. After that had come the runaway in the yard and the splash in the well. Now that well was belching forth to the night a pale and insidious beam of the same demonic tint. Demoniac. Robert E. Howard said demoniac too. And at the time I thought it was just a weird, quaint misspelling, but HP Lovecraft is spelling it demoniac as well. So maybe that's just how they spelled it back then. Instead of just demonic. Bizarre. Maybe they're just copying each other. Anyways, it does credit to the alertness of Amy's mind that he puzzled even at that tense moment over a point which was essentially scientific. He could not but wonder at his gleaning of the same impression from a vapor glimpsed in the daytime against a window opening on the morning sky, and from a nocturnal exhalation seen as a phosphorescent mist against the black and blasted landscape. It wasn't right. It was against nature, and he thought of those terrible last words of his stricken friend. It come from some place where things ain't as they is here. One of them professors said so. All 3 horses outside, tied to a pair of shriveled saplings by the road, were now neighing and pawing frantically. The wagon driver started for the door to do something, but Amy laid a shaky hand on his shoulder. Don't go out there, he whispered. There's more to this, what we know. Nahum said something lived in the well that sucks her life out. that it must be some that growed from a round ball, like one we all seen in the meteor stone that fell a year ago June. Looks and burns, he said, and it's just a clouded color, like that light out there now, that ye can hardly see and can't tell what it is. Now whom thought it feeds on everything living and gets stronger all the time. He said he seen it this last week. It must be something from away off in the sky, like the men from the college last year, says the meteor stone was. The way it's made and the way it works ain't no way o' God's world. Summit from beyond. I like doing folksy voices. Now that I've ruined the mood. So the men paused indecisively as the light from the well grew stronger and the hitched horses pawed and whinnied in increasing frenzy. It was truly an awful moment, with terror in that ancient and cursed house itself. 4 monstrous sets of fragments, 2 from the house and 2 from the well, and the woodshed behind it. Shaft of unknown and unholy iridescence from the slimy depths in front. Amy had restrained the driver on impulse, forgetting how uninjured he himself was after the clammy brushing of that colored vapor in the attic room. But perhaps it is just as well that he acted as he did. No one will ever know what was abroad that night, and though the blasphemy from beyond had not so far hurt any human of unweakened mind, there is no telling what it might have done at that last moment. And with its seemingly increased strength and the special signs of purpose it was soon to display beneath the half-clouded moonlit sky. All at once, one of the detectives at the window gave a short, sharp gasp. The others looked at him, and then quickly followed his gaze upward to the point at which its idle straying had been suddenly arrested. There was no need for words. What had been disputed in country gossip was disputable no longer, and it is because of the thing which every man of that party agreed in whispering later on that the strange days are never talked about in Arkham. It is necessary to premise that there was no wind at that hour of the evening. One did arise not long afterward, but there was absolutely none then. Even the dry tips of the lingering hedge mustard. Have hedgerows of mustard? Mustard's a little small plant. Okay. Even the dry tips of the lingering hedge mustard, gray and blighted, and the fringe on the roof of the standing Democrat wagon were unstirred. Yet amid that tense, godless calm, the high bare boughs of all the trees in the yard were moving. They were twitching morbidly and spasmodically, clawing in convulsive and epileptic madness at the moonlit clouds. Scratching impotently in the noxious air, as if jerked by some alien and bodiless line of linkage, with subterranean terrors writhing and struggling below the black roots. Not a man breathed for several seconds. Then a cloud of darker depth passed over the moon, and the silhouette of clutching branches faded out momentarily. At this, there was a general cry, muffled with awe, but husky and almost identical from every throat. For the terror had not faded with the silhouette, and in a fearsome instant of deeper darkness, the watchers saw wriggling at that treetop height 1,000 tiny points of faint and unhallowed radiance, tipping each bough like the fire of St. Elmo, or the flames that came down on the apostles' heads at Pentecost. It was a monstrous constellation of unnatural light, like a glutted swarm of corpse-fed fireflies dancing in hellish sarabands over an accursed marsh. And its color was that same nameless intrusion which Amy had come to recognize and dread. All the while, the shaft of phosphorence from the well was getting brighter and brighter, bringing to minds of the huddled men a sense of doom and abnormality which far outraced any image their conscious minds could form. It was no longer shining out, it was pouring out. and as the shapeless stream of unplaceable color left the well, it seemed to flow directly into the sky. The veterinarian? I think in modern times we say veterinarian, right? The veterinary shivered and walked to the front door to drop the heavy extra bar across it. Took no less, and had to tug and point for lack of a controllable voice when he wished to draw notice to the growing luminosity of the trees. The neighing and stamping of the horses had become utterly frightful, but not a soul of that group in the old house would have ventured forth for any earthly reward. Reward. With the moments, the shining of the trees increased, while their restless branches seemed to strain more and more toward verticality. Verticality. The wood of the well sweep was shining now, and presently a policeman dumbly pointed to some wooden sheds and beehives near the stone wall in the west. They were commencing to shine too, though the tethered vehicles of the visitors seemed so far unaffected. Then there was a wild commotion and clopping in the road. And as Amy quenched the lamp for better seeing, they realized that the span of frantic grays had broke their sapling and run off with the Democrat wagon. The shock served to loosen several tongues, and embarrassed whispers were exchanged. "It spreads on everything organic that's been around here," the medical examiner. No one replied, but the man who had been in the well gave a hint that his long pole must have stirred up something intangible. "Awful," he added. "There's no bottom at all, just ooze and bubbles, and the feeling of something lurking under there." Amy's horse still pawed and screamed deafeningly in the road outside, and nearly drowned its owner's faint quaver as he mumbled his formless reflections. "Come from that stone that growed down there. It got everything living. It fed itself on him, mind and body. Thad and Murney, Zenas and Nabby, Nahum was the last. They all drunk the water. I got strong on 'em. It come from beyond, where things ain't like to be here. Now it's going home. E.T. Phone home." Couldn't help myself there. At this point, excuse me. At this point, as the column of unknown color flared suddenly stronger and began to weave itself into fantastic suggestions of shape, which each spectator later described differently, there came from poor tethered Hero is Amy's horse, came from poor tethered Hero such a sound as no man before or since ever heard from a horse. Every person in that low-pitched sitting room stopped his ears, and Amy turned away from the window in horror and nausea. Words could not convey it. When Amy looked out again, the hapless beast lay huddled inert on the moonlit ground between the splintered shafts of the buggy. That was the last of Hero till they buried him the next day. But the present was no time to mourn. Almost at this instant, a detective silently called attention to something terrible in the very room with them. Absence of the lamplight, it was clear that a faint phosphorescence had begun to pervade the entire apartment. It glowed on the broad planked floor, in the fragment of rag carpet. It shimmered over the sashes of the small paned windows. It ran up and down the exposed corner posts, coruscated about the shelf and mantel, and infected the very doors and furniture. Each minute saw it strengthen, and at last it was very plain that healthy living things must leave that house. Must leave that house. These braces, man. Not just the braces, they're also pushing my teeth around, and that confuses my tongue randomly. Amy showed them the back door and the path up through the fields to the 10-acre pasture. They walked and stumbled as in a dream, and did not dare look back till they were far away on the high ground. They were glad of the path, for they could not have gone the front way by that well. It was bad enough passing the glowing barn and sheds, and those shining orchard trees with their gnarled, fiendish contours. But thank heaven the branches did their worst twisting high up. The moon went under some very black clouds as they crossed the rustic bridge over Chapman's Brook, and it was blind groping from there to the open meadows. When they looked back toward the valley and the distant gardener place at the bottom, they saw a fearsome sight. All the farm was shining with the hideous unknown blend of color, trees, buildings, and even such grass and herbage as had not been wholly changed to lethal gray brittleness. The bows were all straining skyward, tipped with tongues of foul flame, and lambent tricklings of the same monstrous fire were creeping about the ridgepoles of the house, barn, and sheds. It was a scene from a vision of Fuseli, and over all the rest reigned that riot of luminous amorphousness, that alien and undiminished rainbow of cryptic poison from the well, seething, feeling, lapping, reaching, scintillating, straining, and maligny bubbling in its cosmic and unrecognizable chromatism. Chromaticism. Loose grasp of words. Guess to be fair, this was before spell check. They just had dictionaries in their imagination. And without warning, the hideous thing shot vertically up toward the sky like a rocket or meteor. Leaving behind no trail and disappearing through a round and curiously regular hole in the clouds before any talking a lot about moonlight, but now there's clouds. Anyways. Where is I? Like a rocket or meteor, leaving behind no trail and disappearing through a round and curiously regular hole in the clouds before any mad could gasp or cry out. No watcher can ever forget that sight, and Amy stared blankly at the stars of Cygnus, Deneb twinkling above the others, where the unknown color had melted into the Milky Way. But his gaze was the next moment called swiftly to earth by the crackling in the valley. It was just that, only a wooden ripping and crackling and not an explosion, as so many others of the party vowed. Yet the got Porky Pig there for a second. Only a wooden... Wrong one. Yet the outcome was the same, for in one feverish, kaleidoscopic instant, there burst up from that doomed and accursed farm a gleamingly eruptive cataclysm of unnatural sparks and substance, blurring the glance of the few who saw it, and sending forth to the zenith a bombarding cloudburst of such colored and fantastic fragments as our universe must needs disown. That's an awesome phrase. Universe must needs disown. That's a really good phrase. Must needs disown, or is that? There's through quickly reclosing vapors, they followed the great morbidity that had vanished, and in another second, they had vanished too. Behind and below was only a darkness to which the men dared not return, and all about was a mounting wind which seemed to sweep down in black, four gusts from interstellar space. It shrieked and howled, and lashed the fields and distorted woods in a mad, cosmic frenzy. Till soon the trembling party realized it would be no use waiting for the moon to show what was left down there at Nahum's. Too odd even to hint theories, the 7 shaking men trudged back toward Arkham by the north road. Amy was worse than his fellows, and begged them to see him inside his own kitchen instead of keeping straight on to town. He did not wish to cross the nighted, wind-whipped roads alone to his home on the main road, for he had an added shock that the others were spared. Was crushed forever with the brooding fear he dared not even mention for many years to come. As the rest of the watchers on that tempestuous hill had stolidly set their faces toward the road, Amy had looked back an instant at the shadowed valley of the desolation so lately sheltering his ill-starred friend. In that stricken, faraway spot, he had seen something feebly rise, only to sink down again upon the place from which the great shapeless horror had shot into the sky. It was just a color, but not any color of our earth or heavens. Because Amy recognized that color, and knew that this last faint remnant must still lurk down there in the well, He has never been quite right since. Amy would never go near that place again. It is over a half century now since the horror happened. But he has never been there, and will be glad when the new reservoir blots it out. I should be glad too, for I do not like the way the sunlight changed color around the mouth of that abandoned well I passed. I hope the water will always be very deep, but even so, I shall never drink it. Do not think I shall visit the Arkham country hereafter. 3 of the men who had been with Amy returned the next morning to see the ruins by daylight, but there were not any real ruins. Only the bricks of the chimney, the stones of the cellar, some mineral and metallic litter here and there, and the rim of that nefandous well. Save for Amy's dead horse, which they towed away and buried, and the buggy, which they shortly returned to him. Everything that had ever been living had gone. 5 eldritch acres of dusty gray desert remained, nor has anything ever grown there since. To this day, it sprawls open to the sky like a great spot eaten by acid in the woods and fields. The few who have ever dared glimpse it in spite of the rural terrors, have named it the Blasted Heath. The rural tales are queer. They might be even queerer if city men and college chemists could be interested enough to analyze the water from that disused well, or the gray dust that no wind seems ever to disperse. Botanists, too, ought to study the stunted flora on the borders of that spot, for they might shed light on the country notion that the blight is spreading, little by little, perhaps an inch a year. People say the color of the neighboring herbage is not quite right in the spring, that wild things leave queer prints in the light winter snow. Snow never seems quite so heavy on the Blasted Heath as it is elsewhere. Horses, the few that are left in this motor age, grow skittish in the silent valley, and hunters cannot depend on their dogs too near this blotch of grayish dust. They say the mental influences are very bad too. Numbers went queer in the years after Nahum's taken. They always lacked the power to get away. Then the stronger-minded folk all left the region, and only the foreigners tried to live in the crumbling old homesteads. Could not stay though, and one sometimes wonder what insight beyond ours their wild, weird stores of whispered magic have given them. Their dreams at night, they protest, are very horrible in that grotesque country. I want to say country for some reason. Country. And surely the very look of the dark realm is enough to stir a morbid fancy. No traveler has ever escaped a sense of strangeness in those deep ravines. And artists shiver as they paint thick woods whose mystery is as much of the spirit as of the eye. I myself am curious about the sensation I derived from my one lone walk before Amy told me his tale. When twilight came, I had vaguely wished some clouds would gather, for an odd timidity about the deep sky voids above had crept into my soul. Do not ask me for my opinion. I do not know, that is all. There is no one but Amy to question. For Arkham people will not talk about the strange days, and all 3 professors who saw the aerolite in its color globule are dead. There were other globules, depend upon that. One must have fit itself and escaped, and probably there was another which was too late. No doubt it is still down the well. I know there is something wrong with the sunlight I saw above the miasmal brink. The rustics say the blight creeps an inch a year, so perhaps there is a kind of growth or nourishment even now. Whatever daemon hatchling is there, it must be tethered to something, or else it would quickly spread. Is it fastened to the roots of those trees that claw the air? One of the current Arkham tales is about fat oaks that shine and move as they ought not to do at night. What it is, only God knows. In terms of matter, I suppose the thing Amy described would be called a gas. But this gas obeyed laws that are not of our cosmos. There is no fruit of such worlds, and suns as shines on the telescopes and photographic plates of our observatories. This was no breath from the skies, whose motions and dimensions our astronomers measure are deemed too vast to measure. It was just a color out of space, a frightful messenger from unformed realms of infinity beyond all nature as we know it. From realms whose mere existence stuns the brains and numbs us with the black extracosmic gulfs it throws open before our frenzied eyes. I doubt very much if Ambi consciously lied to me, and I do not think his tale was all a freak of madness as the townsfolk had forewarned. Something terrible came to the hills and valleys on that meteor, and something terrible, though I know not in what proportion, still remains. I should be glad to see the water come. Meanwhile, I hope nothing will happen to Amy. He saw so much of the thing, and its influence was so insidious. Why has he never been able to move away? How clearly he recalled those dying words of Nahum's. Can't get away. Drowsy. You know some that's coming, but ain't no use. Amy is such a good old man. When the Reservoir gang gets to work, I must write the chief engineer to keep a sharp watch on him. I would hate to think of him as the gray, twisted, brittle monstrosity which persists more and more in my troubling sleep. That was The Color Out of Space by HP Lovecraft. I was pleasantly surprised by how good that story is. Because I misremembered which story this is. There was two that I thought it might be, and this is completely different. I don't know if I've even read this one before, but it's good. It starts off very slowly, but I had forgotten how good Lovecraft is at creeping in the horror and cosmic end. Because once this got going at the end of Tuesday when we were reading it, it was really going with Amy falling apart in his monologue at the end of that part. That was good. But yeah, this will be a short stream, just finishing off this story. Oh, actually, I have an idea. Let me do some adjustments to the stream real fast. I have an idea. I can give a little sneak peek at something I started working on today. So this will be a quick preview of my first draft of a new quest that I've been toying with in my mind for a week now. And today I started reaching out to some other GMs for their opinions, and then did a first draft on this potential start of this hypothetical quest. I'll read the first few paragraphs and leave it at that because I don't want to get too far into it and let dude do anything with this. So, this is the first draft of the start of Helldiver's quest. Viridia's final liberation is imminent. The accumulation of microtremors beneath the planet's crust exerts a constant force greater than the sum of its part. At the molten core, a translucent ultraviolet globule coalesces as discrete beads of exotic matter seep down from the surface, dislocating the planet's structures in the wake of each alien injection. Wake ceases to adequately describe what is felt through your legs on the dying planet's surface. Viridia erupts. Dark fluid bolts out of your back-mounted canister, violently depressurizing. It aerosolizes through the bottom's evacuation port and is atomized as it enters the olive bile fumes flooding Viridia's surface. The exotic matter energizes beneath you, launching you in a ballistic arc up and out of the fog beneath the cliff. It is not stone. Raw stone and dirt has been entirely subsumed by terminated terraforming, but regurgitated silicate, biocrete. Your ears are still ringing from the dark fluid container's concussive blast. After one blink, you are sailing above the dense fog below, sailing towards the smoking dark fluid injector. Vertical rail lowers flush with its cylindrical housing. Alpha 4 is next to it. A terminid hunter is on top of him, mandibles and forearms, bodily pinning your squad mate to the biocrete. You try to raise your orange shotgun, but the best you can do is squeeze the trigger and shoot just ahead of your feet against the forces of gravity and the air resistance the dark fluid jump has slammed into you. The hunter spikes its tongue through Alpha's visor in the moment you crash into the bug. The next moment, the dark fluid's injection rig whines, trembles, and slams its cargo through the new fault line, forged through Meridia's dense layers of biocrete dust. Pulling yourself up by the crimson red and pea green blood-coated carapace of the hunter, you do not realize your surroundings until, by rote training, you jam the stimulant cartridge into the base of your neck. Erupt ceases to describe the state of the planet. Meridia collapses. I'm gonna leave it there. I probably should have put on some White Bat retro wave for that instead of leaving on the creepy Lovecraft music. I realized as I was reading that it was coming out way more creepy with this music. It's action. It's action. There is some horror with the Terminids stuff, but it's action, I swear. But that was a quick sneak peek at what I started working on today. I'm thinking if I do start this quest, I'll be doing it on this YouTube channel where once a week I will read a update that will then have a option of what to do next, put up the vote somehow. I haven't quite thought through the logistics of everything, but that is the general idea. A once a week update with a quest lasting through the rest of the week to be called on the day before, probably. I'm thinking if I do this, it'll be on Mondays. That way I can pre-record the narration over the weekend instead of doing it live and stumbling through everything. Although, if I do decide to do it live, it'll probably be on Thursday nights. And then I want to keep reading at least once a day. But reading, I like having 2 days to finish a story. I also like world building and the gaming days. So I have to play around with my 4 streaming days a week schedule. Figure out how I'll do that. But that's something for the future. I'm going to cut the stream now. I will see everyone on Monday for world building. Or if I just go mad lad over the weekend, the first post of Helldiver's Quest. We'll find out. But see everyone next week. Have a fantastic Friday and weekend. Take care, everyone.